I was straight-lined. I mean, totally straight-lined, out of my body, dead for an hour and a half. My name is Richard Cole, and I am 72 years old. I have never been what I would call religious. I've always believed that there was a God, and I believed that there was Jesus, but I've had doubts. I've been a doubter before, but I'm no longer that. And this happened to me in 2005, so that was 6 years ago. And so how it came about was that I was on my way to Monterey. I go up there every year for the historic car races. While I stopped at the stoplight, I had a pain that started in my jaw, right in the mandibular area, went down my jawbone, down my carotid artery, and into my chest. I said, "Whoa, this is strange." My friend and his wife said, "What's wrong with you? You don't look very good. What's your symptoms?" I said, "Well, my hands feel a little sweaty and I feel a little clammy." I said, "I don't know what's going on." He says, "I'm going to take you to the hospital." I said, "Oh, I'll be okay. I'll go home and take an aspirin. This will be done with." He says, "No, we're going right now." So we went in and they put me on a gurney because there was no room in the emergency room. My blood pressure was extremely high. And they gave me a couple of shots right away to try and get my blood pressure down. And then I went right into the x-ray room, and they gave me some x-rays, and came back in a little while, and Steve, the doctor, a friend of mine, says, "You have a serious problem." I said, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "You have an aneurysm, but what's worse, it's split, and I think you're bleeding internally." 5 o'clock the next morning, I was in the the ready room rather, at Cottage Hospital. Anesthesiologist came in and says, "Well, I'm going to, give you a shot right now, and then you're going to go off to sleep." I said, "Okay." I said, "Is the doctor here yet?" "Yeah, he's here." So I asked to see him. I said, "Okay, what are you guys going to do to me?" And he says, "What we have to do is cool you down to a real low temperature, and when we do that, it'll be just like chopping a hole in Lake Michigan in the ice in the middle of the winter. Everything's going to stop. Your brain's going to stop, and your heart will stop." I said, "Well, I've never heard of that before, and I read a lot." And he says, "We usually don't tell our patients what we're going to do to them, or else they'd run down the hall dragging the IV behind them." They told me when I went in that I'd have about a 50-50 chance of making it. I found out later with that kind of operation where they take your heart out, you have a 10% chance of survivability. So the anesthesiologist put the IV in. I went off to sleep right away, and they start rolling me down the hall to the operating room. And then I realized that I was still conscious and I wasn't under yet. It was like I was for a little bit, but then I was awake again. And I saw them roll me into the operating room. And so I wanted to tell the doctors that, "Hey, you got to give me some more of whatever it was you gave me because I'm not out yet." But I couldn't speak. I didn't have any pain or anything like that. I just could not open my mouth and get the words out, even though I tried very hard to tell them that I was still conscious. So I'm laying on the table, and there are 3 doctors standing over me and 2 nurses, and they all have their gowns on, their masks on and everything. They're ready to go. And I heard the doctor ask the nurse for the scalpel, and she got it, and she started to open me up from right here down to here. He did. Opened me up like that, and then they got an electric saw out and started cutting my breastbone open. And then I saw them go down and start to take my heart out, and then everything went black. But I was still conscious, but I couldn't see anything. And it was like a heavy black fog, and I'm just standing there looking around. I couldn't figure out what to do next or what was going to happen next. Right then, 2 beams of light came over my right shoulder. So I started to turn around and look over my shoulder to see where it was coming from. And then I heard a voice. And the voice was very authoritative, not loud, but he says, "Don't turn around." And I'm thinking, well, why not? And he says, "Don't turn around, because if you see my face, you'll have to stay here." And he says, "Now, that'll be okay if you stay here, but I have a job for you. And if you disobey me, I won't be happy." And he says, "You don't want to see me unhappy." So I said, "Yeah, well, okay. I better pay attention and do what he says." And then I said, "I know who you are." He said, "Oh, you do?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, I've got a little problem. I've got a little pet peeve. I've got a little bone to pick with you." He says, "Well, what is it?" He wasn't mad or anything, just a normal speaking voice. And I said, "Well, I know that a new generation is born every 10 years. And I know that if you take the square root of 3 generations, it only goes back to about, I think it's about 589 years. And I said, I know that in the Bible it says that Adam and Eve have been on the earth about 6,000 years, something like that." And he starts laughing. I said, "Well, what's so funny?" He said, "Well, you are." I said, "Why?" He said, "Your math is wrong." And then I just start thinking, I said, where did I get those numbers? I must have been crazy. I couldn't believe that I said that, because, I kind of prided myself on knowing math and science. And all during this conversation, I had a feeling of where he was, that he was walking back and forth behind me, that he was sitting in a white throne, just a plain chair, didn't have jewels or anything on it, but just a plain white chair. And I could just feel that, and I don't know why. That's what I was feeling. The next thing that happened is he said, "Do you have any more questions before you leave?" I said, I got to think about this. And I thought, I was thinking really hard, what am I going to ask God? Couldn't think of anything. I wanted to be really smart enough to ask him something very pertinent. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to revert to an old cliche. What's the meaning of life? And he starts laughing again. I said, what's so funny now? And he says, well, I don't know why, but a lot of people ask me that question, and it's really real simple. But I tell you what, when you come back, we'll sit down. You can ask me all the questions that you ever will have. I'll answer for you. So I said, okay. He says, okay, it's time for you to go back. And I turned around. I'm sorry, but he put his arms around me. He put his arms around me. And it was a feeling that I can't explain. It was unconditional love, but it was words. I can't tell you the words. And I'm sorry, but I always act like this because I can feel it again. So, it changed my life. And the next thing I heard was the nurse was saying, I think he's ready to come out of it. His temperature's at 90 degrees. 9 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. First thing I wanted to do was go out and tell everybody I knew what happened to me. And I found out right away that was the wrong thing to do. Some people were okay with it. Some people just turned around and walked away from me as fast as they could. They were scared to death. They thought I'd lost my mind. But I'll have to tell you that my life has changed completely. I'm no longer afraid of death. All the problems that I thought were problems are all gone. I don't have any problems. I don't have anything that gets me down. A week later, a guy came in that I knew, and he said, I heard about your experience. I said, yeah, it happened. He said, I heard that you were, you had a near-death experience and that you were out for about an hour. And I said, yeah, that's true. And he said, well, the same thing happened to me. And I said, and then I asked him what the meaning of life was. And he says, oh, that's easy. It's all about love. But that was the perfect answer. So I got that message right away. Now I study the Bible, and it's taken me a long time. I've been doing it for 6 years. I'm up to Matthew. I've translated every word from the original manuscripts into English. I was baptized recently. People ask me questions about that. Well, why are you getting baptized now? And I said, because it's the right time. I don't know what else to tell them. I don't believe that you have to be baptized to go to heaven, but I know one thing. I want to follow what Jesus did. He set an example. I want to, so I did.